You don't realize it in the moment, but the situation has already changed. The lights are behind you, your car is stopped, and before a real conversation even begins, the officer says something that sounds simple. Step out of the vehicle. And just like that, you're no longer just a driver. You're part of a situation you don't fully control anymore. Let me ask you something real. When an officer gives you that instruction, do you immediately move without thinking, or do you pause and process what's actually happening? Drop your honest answer in the comments, because that exact reaction, what you do in the first second, is where most people unknowingly make a mistake that can follow them legally. Now, here's the part that most drivers never get taught. A traffic stop isn't just about laws, it's about perception. Before you even open your door, the officer has already been watching you for several seconds, sometimes longer. They've seen how you pulled over, how quickly you reacted, whether your movements were smooth or hesitant, whether your hands stayed visible or disappeared. And by the time they reach your window, they already have a working theory about you, not a final judgment, but a starting point. Now, when they ask you to step out, that's not random, it's a decision. Sometimes it's routine, sometimes it's strategic, and sometimes it's based on something you did without realizing it. This is where things start to shift, because stepping out of the car feels like a simple action, but legally and psychologically, it changes the entire structure of the interaction. Inside your car, you have a boundary. Outside, that boundary disappears. Your space is gone, your positioning is controlled, and your behavior becomes even more visible. Now think about how most people react. Their heart rate jumps, their thoughts speed up, and they move quickly, too quickly. They reach for something, they adjust their seat, they grab their phone, they fix their clothing. All of it feels normal, but under pressure, normal behavior can look suspicious. And this is where the problem begins, because officers are trained to look for patterns, not just obvious threats, but subtle indicators, movements that don't match calm behavior, actions that suggest concealment or uncertainty. And once something stands out, even slightly, the tone of the stop begins to change. Now, let me show you how small this mistake can be. You're told to step out. Instead of pausing, you instantly lean down, maybe to grab your wallet, maybe to check something near your seat. That single motion, lasting less than a second, can be interpreted in a completely different way. Not because it proves anything, but because it creates doubt. And in law enforcement, doubt is often treated as risk. Once that perception shifts, everything tightens. Instructions become more direct. Observation becomes more focused. And your room to make mistakes becomes smaller. Now, here's what most people misunderstand. They think the danger comes from saying the wrong thing. And yes, that matters. But what you do physically in those first seconds can matter just as much, sometimes even more. Because physical actions are immediate. They can't be taken back. They can't be reworded. They can't be explained in the same way words can. They create an impression that sticks. Now, imagine two different drivers in the same situation. The first reacts instantly, moves quickly, fumbles slightly, maybe looks nervous. The second pauses, keeps their hands visible, moves slowly and clearly, and exits the vehicle without any sudden motion. Same instruction, same officer, completely different perception. And that perception often shapes what happens next. Now here's something that might surprise you. You are allowed to comply without rushing. That's the key. Compliance doesn't mean speed, it means clarity, it means control, and it means making sure every movement you make can be easily understood. Because confusion is what creates suspicion. Now, let's go deeper into something most people never think about. When you step out of the vehicle, the officer is not just watching your body. They're reading your behavior like information, your posture, your eye contact, your hand placement, your pacing. All of it forms a picture, and that picture influences how they respond to you. If you look unpredictable, they become more controlling. If you look calm, they often stay measured. This is not about right or wrong. It's about how human behavior is interpreted under pressure. Now, let's talk about one of the biggest mistakes drivers make right here. They try to act normal. But because they're nervous, their version of normal becomes inconsistent. They move too fast, then too slow. They speak quickly, then go quiet. They look around too much. And that inconsistency stands out more than anything else. Because consistent behavior feels predictable, inconsistent behavior feels uncertain. And uncertainty is what officers are trained to manage carefully. Now here's where experienced drivers and travelers handle things differently. They don't try to act normal. They try to stay controlled. They simplify everything. Hands visible, movement slow, responses clear, no extra actions, no unnecessary reaching, no sudden shifts. And that simplicity changes everything, because it removes guesswork. And when there's no guesswork, there's less room for negative interpretation. Now, I want to bring your attention to something very specific: your hands. If there's one thing that matters more than anything else in that moment, it's what your hands are doing. Why? Because hands can hold objects, hands can reach quickly, hands can hide things. So, officers are naturally focused on them. If your hands stay visible and calm, the perceived level of risk drops. If your hands disappear or move suddenly, the perceived level of risk rises instantly. It's that simple. Now, let's connect this to something bigger. Every traffic stop is a balance between control and cooperation. The officer is trying to maintain control. You are expected to cooperate, but cooperation doesn't mean losing awareness. It means understanding the situation clearly and acting in a way that doesn't create unnecessary problems. Now, here's the part most people never hear. You don't need to impress the officer. You don't need to over-explain. You don't need to rush to prove anything. What you need to do is avoid creating doubt, because doubt is what expands the situation. And once a simple stop expands, it becomes much harder to bring it back down. Now think about this. Have you ever seen someone turn a minor stop into something bigger without even realizing how it happened? It usually starts with a small mistake, a quick movement, a nervous reaction, an inconsistent response. And then everything builds from there, not instantly, but gradually. Now here's what separates people who handle these situations well. They understand timing, they don't react instantly, they respond deliberately. That small difference, reaction versus response, is where control either stays with you or slips away. Now, I want you to imagine the same moment again. The officer says, "Step out of the vehicle." This time, instead of rushing, you take a controlled breath. Your hands stay visible. You move slowly. You open the door clearly. You step out without any sudden action, and you stand in a calm, predictable way. Nothing dramatic, nothing forced, just controlled. That version of the interaction feels completely different. And more importantly, it looks completely different from the officer's perspective. Now, here's something I want you to really remember. Most people don't get into trouble because they intended to do something wrong. They get into trouble because they didn't understand how their actions were being interpreted. And once an action is interpreted a certain way, it becomes part of the situation. That's why awareness matters more than intention. Now, as we wrap this up, I want to leave you with one clear idea. A traffic stop is not just about what you say. It's about what you show. Your behavior speaks first. Your movements speak louder. And in those first few seconds, before any real conversation begins, you're already telling a story. So the next time those lights appear behind you, remember this. Slow down your reactions. Control your movements. Keep things clear and visible. Because the difference between a routine stop and a complicated one often comes down to a single moment most people never even notice.